Have you ever noticed how your mind can become louder than the world itself? How even when everything around you is calm, something inside you won't stop running, replaying old words, imagining outcomes that never happen, trying to solve problems that may not even exist. You sit in silence, but your thoughts aren't silent. They spiral, they repeat, they chase themselves until you forget what peace feels like. You start analyzing every decision, every message, every moment. You rewrite conversations in your head. You wonder if you said too much or too little. You doubt your choices, question your worth, and call it being careful. But deep down, you know it's not caution, it's noise. The truth is, overthinking doesn't come from intelligence. It comes from fear, fear of being wrong, fear of being judged, fear of losing control. You want clarity, yet the more you think, the cloudier things become. Like muddy water stirred by restless hands, the more you try to clear it, the less you can see. And somewhere between those thoughts, you realize that you've stopped living. You've become a prisoner of your own mind. There's a moment, quiet but powerful, when you finally ask yourself, why do I think so much about everything? And beneath that question lies an even deeper one. What would happen if I simply stopped? The Stoics understood this struggle long before you were born. They lived in chaos too, in politics, war, uncertainty. But they learned something timeless. Your mind will never find peace through control. It finds peace through clarity. And clarity is not about thinking more. It's about seeing truth as it is. So today's lesson begins here, in this small but sacred realization. You are not your thoughts. You are the one watching them. Because the moment you understand that is the moment the fog begins to lift. The Stoics taught that peace is not found in the absence of thought, but in mastery over it. They believed the mind is like a river, steady when left undisturbed, but turbulent when constantly touched. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This truth, so simple and ancient, holds the cure to overthinking. Because overthinking is not about the world, it's about how you interpret it. It's the mind's way of wrestling with uncertainty, demanding answers before life is ready to give them. It's an attempt to predict, to perfect, to prevent pain. But the Stoics would tell you, pain is not avoided by control, it's softened by acceptance. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And that's what overthinking truly is. The imagination turned against itself. You rehearse tragedies that never happen. You invent scenarios that never come true. You drain yourself fighting battles that exist only in thought. The Stoic mind sees through this illusion. It doesn't chase clarity, it creates it through stillness. Clarity is not a result of figuring everything out. It's what remains when the unnecessary noise falls away. The more you try to think your way out of confusion, the deeper you sink. It's like trying to smooth waves with your hands. The water only grows rougher. But if you let it settle, it clears on its own. The Stoic way is not to suppress thought, but to observe it without being consumed. You step back, you watch, you ask, is this thought useful? Does it serve peace or destroy it? And if it serves nothing but fear, you let it pass like a cloud drifting across a wide, calm sky. The modern world tells you to think more, analyze more, prepare more. The Stoics would whisper the opposite, think less. Perceive more, because clarity doesn't come from excess thought, it comes from pure perception. When you stop reacting to every idea, You begin to see truth as it is, not as your fear paints it. You see people without judgment. You see life without panic. You see yourself without distortion. And that's when something shifts. You no longer feel trapped inside your thoughts. You start to feel the space between them. That space, that silence, is where wisdom begins. For as Epictetus said, it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things. And when judgment quiets, peace returns. You wake up, and before the sun even rises, your mind is already at work. You replay yesterday's mistakes. You predict tomorrow's problems. You wonder what people think. You analyze what you said. It's as if your thoughts have a life of their own, running faster than your breath, louder than your heartbeat. And though you appear calm on the outside, inside there's a storm. You question everything, not because you want truth, but because you fear regret. You want certainty before you act, reassurance before you rest. But life never gives either. Life only gives the moment, and the mind that refuses to accept that moment becomes its own cage. That's the hidden weight of overthinking. It disguises itself as logic, but it's built from fear. It convinces you that thinking more will bring control, yet it only multiplies confusion. Like someone lost in a forest who keeps walking in circles, your mind keeps revisiting the same thoughts, hoping repetition will bring resolution. It never does. The Stoics would call this the sickness of attachment, attachment to outcome, to perfection, to the illusion that control equals peace. But peace doesn't live there. Peace begins when you stop trying to fix everything in your head and start seeing things as they are. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." The mind resists that truth because it wants to do something. It wants to keep moving, keep solving, keep managing. It fears that silence means ignorance, or that letting go means defeat. But what if silence is wisdom? What if letting go is strength? There's a deep inner conflict in every thinking mind, the battle between control and clarity. Control says, "I must think this through until it makes sense." Clarity says, "I'll wait until my mind is still enough to see clearly." The first is frantic. The second is free. But you've lived your whole life in a world that rewards noise, a world where busyness is praised, where silence feels unnatural. You've been taught that doing nothing is laziness, when, in truth, it's the birthplace of wisdom. That's why clarity feels so distant. Not because you lack intelligence, but because you've been conditioned to drown it in noise. Overthinking is your mind's attempt to control life, but life was never meant to be controlled. It was meant to be lived with awareness, moment by moment. The Stoics' challenge, then, is not to stop thinking altogether. It's to think rightly, with order, with calm, with purpose. To choose thoughts the way a warrior chooses battles, carefully and only when necessary. You cannot silence every thought, but you can refuse to be ruled by them. You can stand in the center of your own mind and watch the storm pass untouched. That's the heart of Stoic control, not dominance over the world, but discipline within. Because the war was never out there, it was always within you, and the moment you see that clearly the war begins to end. There comes a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when you finally see it. You realize that most of what you call thinking isn't clarity at all, it's noise, it's fear disguised as logic. It's your mind trying to protect you from life itself. And in that moment of realization, something within you begins to loosen. You take a breathy not to escape the storm, but to observe it. For the first time, you don't rush to fix the thought. You don't chase the answer, you simply let the thought be, and then, like a pond after the wind dies down, your mind begins to settle. You see how every wave of worry was stirred by your own reaction, and how peace was waiting underneath it all. The Stoics spoke of this often. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When you understand that, your relationship with your mind changes forever. You stop asking, "How do I stop overthinking?" and start asking, "Why do I believe every thought?" That question cuts deep because it exposes how much power you've given to noise. How many times have you mistaken overthinking for intelligence? How many times have you confused worry with preparation or anxiety with care? The turning point in a Stoic life is not dramatic. It's quiet. It's when you finally see that the mind will always speak, but you don't have to listen to everything it says. You begin to understand what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That sentence alone can change a life, because once you stop trying to control what you cannot, you finally reclaim control over what you can, your inner state. And this is where clarity begins, not in solving every problem, not in knowing every answer, but in choosing to return to stillness when the world tries to pull you apart. You start to see that every time you react without awareness, you feed the chaos. But every time you pause, breathe, and stay silent, you reclaim your peace. Overthinking is a habit. Clarity is a practice. They cannot exist in the same space, and so you start to train your mind not to think less, but to think slower. Not to control everything, but to control yourself. It's not easy. The mind will keep trying to drag you back into the storm, to the what-ifs, the regrets, the imaginary conversations. But this time you're not the same. You see the thought rise, and you let it pass. You no longer chase every cloud in the sky, because you've realized the sky itself was never disturbed. And that's the moment when you see clearly, when you realize that clarity was never missing. It was only hidden beneath noise. Marcus wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. That is your true refuge, not a place, but a state of mind." When you stop running from your thoughts and start watching them, you discover that peace was not something to find, it was something to remember. That's the turning point, the moment when you stop fighting the mind and start mastering it. You now understand that peace isn't found by silencing the mind, but by mastering your response to it. The next step is practice, because wisdom without practice is like a lamp with no flame. It cannot light your path. So you begin slowly. Each morning, before the world invades your mind, you sit in stillness. You breathe deeply, not to escape your thoughts, but to watch them rise and fade. You begin to see that thoughts are like passing travelers. They appear, they speak, they leave. You don't need to follow them all. You remind yourself of a truth the Stoics lived by. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Seneca, overthinking thrives in imagination. It feeds on what hasn't happened yet. It builds entire worlds out of fears that never existed, and yet most of your peace is lost fighting battles that were never real. So you train yourself to return to now. When your mind begins to spiral, you ask, "What problem am I facing right now, in this very moment?" Usually, the answer is none. Your breath is steady, the ground beneath you is firm, the chaos you feel is not around you, it's within. And in that moment of realization, you stop feeding the illusion. You begin to break the cycle. Each day, you practice choosing awareness over reaction. When someone speaks harshly, you pause. When a situation feels uncertain, you breathe before judging. When your mind starts replaying the past, you whisper to yourself, return to the present. Nothing needs fixing here. This is how Stoics lived, not by controlling life, but by controlling themselves. They didn't waste energy predicting tomorrow or regretting yesterday. They directed their power toward what was within their control, their mind, their attitude, their action. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." That's not weakness. That's strength in its purest form, the courage to let go of what doesn't belong to you. So you practice letting go again and again. You let go of the need to be understood. You let go of the need to predict every outcome. You let go of the illusion that clarity comes from control, because clarity only comes from stillness, from being able to sit with yourself and see what truly matters. You start noticing how much mental noise is created by comparison, by looking at others, by replaying what-ifs, by imagining a life you don't live. So you shift your attention inward. You start measuring peace, not progress. You start valuing silence, not validation. The world around you doesn't slow down, but you do. And in that stillness you notice something. Your thoughts begin to soften. The noise begins to fade. The mind that once felt like an enemy becomes a companion, calm, disciplined, observant. The practice becomes your way of living. Each moment is an opportunity to choose clarity, to breathe instead of react, to pause instead of panic, to watch instead of worry, and every time you do, the mind learns. It learns that you no longer serve it, it serves you. That's the essence of Stoicism, not cold detachment, but warm awareness, not suppression, but mastery, because the goal was never to stop thinking, it was to think clearly. And that clarity is earned in small, silent moments, in the choice to be calm when everything inside you wants to rush. That is the daily practice of a Stoic mind. To be the stillness within the storm, to act with reason, not reaction, to walk through the noise of the world and remain untouched. With time, you begin to notice something subtle, a peace that doesn't come from fixing everything, but from realizing that not everything needs to be fixed. The noise that once filled your mind no longer feels heavy. The questions that once haunted you lose their urgency, because you've learned that clarity isn't about having all the answers. It's about learning which questions are worth asking. You start to see how much energy people waste trying to control what was never theirs, opinions, outcomes, the future, the past. And you understand now that wisdom lies in surrender, not in weakness, but in alignment with truth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. You finally understand what he meant. Strength was never about domination or perfection or always knowing what to do. It was about remaining calm in face of uncertainty. It was about being able to see the storm and not become it. Overthinking loses its grip when you stop chasing control. The fog begins to clear when you accept that you don't need to control everything to move forward. You just need to take one honest step right here, right now. You start living slowly, deliberately. You wake with awareness. You speak less, but mean more. You listen without judging. You think before reacting. And this new rhythm of life, this calm pace, begins to heal you. You see that the mind is not an enemy, but a mirror. When it's still, the reflection is clear. When it's restless, everything becomes distorted. So you guard your stillness. You protect your peace like a sacred space. You no longer let every passing worry enter your mind and take residence. You've built an inner temple, and not everything deserves entry. And when you fall back into old habits, because you will, you no longer punish yourself. You simply return. Back to the breath, back to the present, back to the truth that you already know. Peace was never gone. You just wandered too far into your thoughts to see it. The world around you continues loud, chaotic, unpredictable, but within you there is a quiet order, a center that doesn't move, a light that doesn't flicker. You realize at last that life will never stop throwing uncertainty your way, but your mind no longer needs to tremble in its shadow, because you've learned the Stoic art of seeing clearly, of standing still when everything else moves. And when the next wave of thought arrives, you smile, you don't fight it, you simply observe it pass. For the first time in a long time, you feel free. Peace isn't the absence of thought, it's the mastery of it.